My name is David Brown. I am the author of a blog called The Trendy Troodon, and on this channel I've tried different things, and a lot of what's getting the most response has been Marx figures. So in this video I'll be talking about one of the more unusual things I have. They're Marx figures from Ukraine, and how that happened. As much as we know about what happened, I'll be getting into. And I'll also be talking more generally about, again, as I did a previous video, about Marx figure collecting and what you can do to be sure you know what you're getting and uh, don't either pay too much or really let someone undersell the material. It is important that we get information out there to sellers about what's really valuable. So, where this really starts in either the late 60s or maybe very early 1970s, I think the evidence is going towards the 70s. Marx made some kind of arrangement with a factory in what was then the Soviet Union. Now it's Donetsk, Ukraine. Yes, and I won't even be going into the politics that much. I actually got these figures before that really blew up. So for a significant amount of time, these figures were being made, apparently with Marx's authorization. That would have effectively ended when the company went under in 1979. It is pretty clear that someone was continuing to manufacture it. It might have been the same factory, or it might have been others who got hold of the molds. And whether these were Marx molds, copies of the molds, we don't know. That's something else we probably will never know in detail or for certain. And what's most interesting about these is what got manufactured. So, for where I came into this, in 2020, when I was taking off with collecting Marx stuff and publishing about it, I saw a listing in Eastern Europe, not Ukraine, or technically the former Soviet Union, one of the other Eastern European countries, who said they had Marx figures made in the Soviet Union. It was not that expensive. So I was willing to go out a limb and pay for it. And when I inspected them, these were very clearly legitimate Marx figures, at least, and this is the usual common denominator, clearly someone who had access to Marx molds. And I got a set of 5 out of it. So here's 2 of them. Now, what you can see, and I'll be going into this further, is that these are Wild West figures. Here's a couple more like that. Here's a guy in a cowboy hat, and a guy similar to the other 2 I just showed, in that he's got a coonskin hat. Now, that I'll talk about a little more. And this really was what I bought the whole set for. It's a Soviet soldier with what's called a PPSH-41 submachine gun. This gets broken a lot. You can see here that it is a bit bent. I think that probably isn't really aged, just something random in the plastic. And here you can see a couple Soviet figures that I am satisfied are from Marx. This is a sniper. I just recently figured out that this is supposed to have a bayonet, but I don't think it's actually broken off. It looks to me more like they altered the mold. Here's another one, more like an officer. You can see he's got a pistol, then he's throwing the grenade. And what the hell they were thinking with these pose, who knows? Maybe he's trying to limbo for Mother Russia. And what you can see with this guy also is that there's actually Russian markings here. I don't know how clear I can get the camera to show it, but this is Russian script. They call it Cyrillic. If you know what you're doing, though the researchers have been saying the guy that's supposed to be named after might not have had much to do with the development of Cyrillic. Even I can't tell you what this means. I study a lot about Eastern Europe. I may do another video on that, but I never learned to read Cyrillic. Still, that is Cyrillic, so it was definitely made in the Soviet Union or one of the Eastern European countries. And this guy also has the Cyrillic markings on the bottom. They're not exactly the same. It looks like there's really more information here than on this one. And these guys, on the other hand, have nothing at all, which is in itself something that will stand out for anything that isn't just a recent recast. And this guy also has no markings. And what I'm thinking from that is that these might have been a single set that was made without markings, or maybe only one or a few were marked per set. We again probably will never really know for sure. This guy, as I was saying, does have the same style, the coonskin hat. But he's a different color, so he might have been cast at a different time or even a different factory. What you can really know or don't know about Marx figures from plastic is one more thing I would probably give its own video later. And what's really egregious here, this is a Marx casualty figure. Here's another like that I'm satisfied is an original Marx figure. Yes, so they did do figures of guys who were shot, or in this case hit with an arrow. And what's really dark about it is that they would do exit wounds. You can see that on this guy. Here it didn't work out as well. You see the arrow going in. It really, if it was realistically sized, would be just stuck in the shoulder, which would be a horrible wound. But they do have an exit wound that wouldn't really even line up, and it just looks like a barnacle. Now, the big question with these guys is, why do they have the coonskin hats? Now, what I've read looking into that is that Marx did do figures, tying toy soldier figures in play sets for the Alamo. There were also other series, movies, media they might have licensed or planned or tried to license involving Davy Crockett, which pretty obviously is the source of the coonskin hats. That's something else people argue about, is whether it was historical, but we don't need to cover that. And I have done a little research trying to confirm if these were made in the United States. it would definitely be a big deal if the Ukraine factory had made Marx figures that weren't manufactured in the U.S. I think it's fairly unlikely that was the case, but I would say if these were issued in the U.S., it was in limited numbers. They definitely made a significant number of figures in other sizes than these guys, which was usually where the starting point for the 6-inch figures. And that would have been in the very early 60s. As I've said before, Marx didn't really start making the 6-inch until 1963 onward. And here's something I can do with these figures. There's what I call a Clack Test. It's pretty much take two Marx figures, bang them together, and see what it sounds like. And that can tell you something about it. Now, I'm going to start as a control group with these Wild West figures. They have the Marx markings. I am absolutely convinced that these are genuine Marx, probably 1960s. And again, I don't know how well you'll hear this. They make a fairly deep sound. And you'll notice it more with the astronauts, which are among the most robust Marx figures. That you can definitely hear is a very solid sound. And here are the Mexican figures. These are Mexican copies of the Marx Japanese soldiers. They have their own video. These have a very different sound. You can tell just from the sound that this is a very hard plastic, which tends to result in them being more prone to breaking. With the Soviet figures, these, I think, might have been cast at different times. Maybe somewhat later, like into the 70s. But again, they've got Marx markings. And there were separate markings for the Marx Plastimarx Mexican division. And again, it's a pretty solid sound. With these, they are very different. They sound different to me. Again, I don't know what will come out in the video. Yes. So if the figure doesn't look too delicate, and these were usually very solid, you could try this, see what you can figure out. So, big question here then is, are these things valuable? And this is where there is a big difference between rarity and demand. I had discussed that in a recent video, and I had a development since then. In another video, I talked about the Canvas Cuties line and how there was a second series in that line that's very rare now. Right after I made that video, I actually, for the very first time, saw some of them listed online. There were two sets, one a full 8, another of 5, in separate lots from the same merchant. I looked into getting permission to distribute his images. I didn't hear back, so I'm just not going to go there. That's not what I do. And they sold, if you were averaging the prices, for maybe $30 or $40 a figure, which is high but not exceptional. With Marx Marvel figures especially, those are the ones that go for the highest prices. There, for an original, 30 is really the bottom of the price range. By comparison with these guys, the main thing you're going to be dealing with is the price of shipping. It's likely that anyone selling these will be somewhere in Eastern Europe, the former East Bloc. And with these, when I ordered them, because it was the pandemic, the postage got held up, so it took a while for them to arrive. But even with shipping factored in, it wasn't that bad. It definitely wouldn't have brought up the price to $10 or more per figure. And the other pretty obvious thing is that is just a part of the world where the economy is very different. A lot of the time the exchange rates isn't favorable, so what they would consider a good price in US dollars would probably not be that high. And that's not something that's going to change. And a further problem, as I've shown, is just that the majority of these that I own are unmarked. So that could make the collector value difficult. But if you've seen one, you can get a pretty good idea what to expect. Here I have this brown that is quite distinct from any US Marx figure I've seen. There's also the green, and I've seen them in a reddish color. It's a little bit like this orange color, but more into the red from the images I've seen. That is also quite distinctive, and again, you can try just banging the plastic. That will at least tell you something about the quality and hardness of the plastic. And do bear in mind, the harder the plastic is, the more you need to be careful with them. Here you can see this guy has a finger broken off, and there was a strap on the binoculars that broke off also. This was long before I got hold of it. With the Marx hard plastic, it's softer, so it might be more likely to bend, but it's much less likely to break. So with these, if you're collecting Marx, it's definitely worth paying whatever price you can for what you can find. When I have looked into it since acquiring my set of figures, at any given time there could be a few listings here and there, and a lot of the time they are set. So because of that, the shipping price isn't going to be that big a problem. If you can pay $10 to have 3, 4, or 5 of these shipped, you're definitely going to come out ahead. And there's still a whole lot we don't know about these. And whether or not we find out more, there's just no way to foresee that. What would be ideal is, as American collectors get more interested in this, we should, if the lines of communication and economics stay open, get more information from the former USSR and Eastern Europe about these. One thing that has come out, there was a book that mentioned these figures, and what he said was that most of the toy soldiers in the USSR were very different. They were a flat style soldier, which Marx did make for a short period, and they were common in the US. It was like a board game piece. It would show the soldier in profile, but head on it would be thin or just a flat piece. So that apparently was typical for the USSR. But then when Marx started having them made by, again, it's almost certain some kind of license, there was enough demand and interest that it really ended up being, by this guy's account, restricted to the higher ups, people who were in the Communist Party, the military, or just fairly wealthy. Uh, and these, again, are the people, if they are the original buyers, you'd be dealing with, and they are the kind of people who would probably be willing to sell if they're not completely sentimental about it. So, uh, we're probably going to keep getting these into the United States, and hopefully we will find out more. Now, I'm already going on pretty long, though not exceptionally for me. I'm going to end this video now, and I will be posting more about this. For now, I'm signing out.